All right, civics class, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you watch this. I'm Mr. Steve Biankowski, your civics teacher, and this will be our first real lesson. Whether you're going to use this as online learning or as a review tool or whatever, we'll have this always saved to YouTube so you can refer to it and either use it to learn the course to begin with or use it for review and study. Civics is the study of citizenship and government. So as we start our study of citizenship and government, we need to know what is America and what it is to be an American and who we are as Americans. And we start off with these pictures right here. Abby, what are we looking at?
Birthday party. Birthday parties.
Birthday parties? Anything different between the two birthday parties?
No. Well, one's hitting a piñata. The other people are blowing out candles.
Sure. The one to the left, somebody's hitting a piñata. Have you been to birthday parties with piñatas?
Yeah.
A lot of them? Or some of them?
Some of them.
Does every birthday party have a piñata?
No.
Where does the tradition of the piñata come from?
Spain, right?
Latin American, Mexican, yes ma'am. So, we call these things traditions. We have parties, celebrations, holidays, the way we as a people act. These things are called our traditions. A birthday party is just one. In your normal American birthday party, what do you think you're going to see at a normal American birthday party?
Streamers, cake.
You're going to see some sort of decorations, maybe streamers. Almost always you see a
Cake.
and what's on top of the cake?
Candles.
Candles, okay. What else might be at a traditional birthday party?
Games.
Games. You invite guests, okay. But we saw the one birthday party had a piñata. Did you go to these birthday parties with piñatas in Mexico or Guatemala or Spain, or was that here in the United States?
Here.
Is that a tradition that's solely a Latin American Mexican tradition, or is it now almost sort of normal that anybody in the United States may have a piñata?
Yeah, I'd say it's widespread to here now.
Sure. So these traditions may start as something that's part of a certain ethnic group, but over time, one of the great things about America is these traditions become normal American traditions. Have you ever eaten pizza?
Yeah.
What ethnic group or tradition does that come from?
Italians.
How about sushi?
Yep.
You've had sushi?
Yep.
What group does that typically come from?
Asia.
Asia, particularly Japanese, right? So one of the things we need to understand about America is it is a country with a whole bunch of different traditions brought here by people from different countries and different ethnic groups, but it becomes an American tradition. You go to Rock and Roll Sushi right there on 90, is it just filled with Japanese people?
No.
No. Is there like nobody there?
No.
It's busy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's popular. So these foods become part of our traditions and it becomes American more than just Japanese or Japanese American. 13% of the Americans living in America right now have come from another country. 99% of us are immigrants or the children of immigrants. Our family, Abby, where does our family come from?
Poland, right?
Poland. My family comes from Poland. Do you remember where else my family comes from?
Germany.
Germany. My family, the Biankowskis on my side, come from Germany and Poland. You know where our my wife's family comes from?
No, probably somewhere in Europe.
Yes, they've been here a lot longer. My family really came here as my grandparents are the first Links and Biankowskis to come to America. So my parents were born in America. My grandparents came from Germany and Poland. Mom's family has lived here a lot longer than that, but they are immigrants too. They're Scotch-Irish, so they probably came from the British Isles somewhere between England, Ireland, and Scotland. Okay? Who are the only people that are real Americans that their entire family, generations back, were actually born in the United States.
Native Americans?
Native Americans, and that's it. And that's only 1% of the population. So 99%, 98 here, come from immigrants or families of immigrants. And I want you to think about that, because sometimes the idea of immigration comes up. And it's easy for us to say, hey, you know what? We don't want immigrants. Build walls, close the borders. Where does your family come from and when? You know, I could say it's easy enough to close borders and erect walls and fences, etc. But if we did that a certain period of time, my family never would have come to America. And that's the exact same thing with 99, 98% of the rest of us. Only 1%, 2% of Americans are Native American heritage and background. So of course, if we were in class, we'd talk about our own backgrounds, but we're not. So I want you to think, where does your family come from? If you don't know, please ask your parents and grandparents.
Put it in the comment section.
Yes, put it in the comment section. Let us know where you're from. Ireland, Italy, Poland, Germany, Czechoslovakia, etc. Over time, the place where people come from to America changes. Here, in 1890, 14% of the population were immigrants, but the bulk of them came from this blue part of the pie, which says what, Abigail?
Europe.
So in the 1890s, most of the immigrants to the United States came from Europe. Well, if you know what Europe is. If you were in class, we'd make sure you know. I'd show you on the map. If you don't know where Europe is, you need to Google it. But Europe is England, Ireland, Scotland, France, Germany, Poland, Italy, etc. That bunch of countries, that continent across the Atlantic Ocean, okay? That's Europe. Immigration has changed over time. So as of 2015, we still have a lot of immigrants, 43 million-ish Americans are immigrants, 13% of the population. Where do the bulk of our immigrants come from today? This lime green.
Latin America.
Latin America, what is that? Mexico, Guatemala, Ecuador, El Salvador. Basically that bunch of countries to the south of our border, called Latin America because they share that Latin Spanish background. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we have America. Almost all of us are immigrants, children of immigrants, great-great-grandchildren of immigrants, etc. 13% of us right now are first-generation Americans. How has that changed over time? In the beginning of the country, a lot of our immigration was from Europe. That has changed to now where most of our immigration is from Latin America, and where's the second biggest place we get immigration from?
Asia.
Asia, and that makes sense. There's some big countries in Asia. Where do you think we get our Asian immigrants from?
China?
China is huge because there's 1 billion people in China. So even if a small number of Chinese immigrate to us, that's still a big number.
Mm-hmm.
How about another country with a huge population in Asia?
Japan?
Japan, not as much. Japan's a smaller.
Korea?
India is another country with about 1 billion people. We get a lot of Indians. And interesting enough, because our histories are very tied together, we once basically owned this country. Does anybody know this other Asian country? It's a whole bunch of islands that a lot of people have emigrated from these islands and become United States citizens. And a lot of them have served in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps. Emma's friend.
Emma's friend?
Mm-hmm. What's their heritage? What's their ethnic group?
Joy?
Mm-hmm. Philippines, Filipinos. So we'll see there, and Abby's got the 90% of that question right. The bulk of our immigration comes from Mexico. A lot of reasons. There's a big population in Mexico, and we share a border, so it's right there. So it's kind of intuitive we get a lot of immigration from Mexico. Other countries are really big, and we get immigrants from. China and India are the two big countries in Asia from which we get a lot of immigration. And then right after that is Philippines, and you'll see it go down a lot. How did the first human beings get to North America, Abigail?
Well, Columbus didn't do it, but
Nope. Because there were human beings here for tens of thousands of
Yeah.
years before Columbus.
Pangea.
Well, that's way far back. Abby says Pangea. If you don't know your geology, once upon a time, geologists think there's this huge continent. Everything was smushed together in one mega supercontinent called Pangea. But the world you're on right now is basically floating on plates on lava. So these plates have moved over time to get to the continents where we look at now. Let me ask you this. Where do we think the first human beings come from? Homo sapien, where does Homo sapiens start on planet Earth?
Like where they originate from?
Yes.
Like monkeys.
No, not where we... The first human beings, Homo sapiens, where did they live? What continent were they on?
Europe?
They were in Africa. Most scientists say the first human beings originated in Africa, maybe around 200,000 years ago. These human beings spread out. Europe was probably the second place they got to. Then they migrated through Asia. And what we see here is what most scientists think the first human beings got to North America. They think they came from Asia across what's today called Russia, across the Bering Land or Ice Bridge. Once upon a time, scientists think this was either iced over or it was land. So about 15 to 20,000 years ago, the first human beings walked and or went on small boats from Asia through what today is Alaska and what today is Canada into North America.
Isn't that what Ice Age is about?
It is kind of, yes. If you remember, I don't know, some of you are young, but Abby grew up, one of the movies she'd watch was Ice Age. And not just the animals, but the people too would constantly move. Partly because of climate, because climate's always changing. Partly to find food, and partly to avoid other humans. So most scientists think 15, 20,000 years ago, the first human beings come to North America and settle in North America. These would be the human beings that we would call Native Americans, the first humans to live in North America. The ones that were here when, yes, either the Vikings, Columbus, and everybody else starts coming to North America, these are the human beings who are here. Were they all the same? Did they all speak the same language? Did they have all the same cultures?
No.
No. We find when the first Europeans do come to North America, these people had different cultures. They spoke their own languages. They lived different ways. So a Native American living in what we call today New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Great Lakes region was different than a Native American who was in Northwest Florida. And they all have different tribes. So you know any names of any tribes of Native Americans, Abigail?
Sioux?
For example, the Sioux, a huge nation of Native Americans who lived mostly in the middle part of the country, the Midwest. How about around here? What are some Native American tribes that grew up in Florida, Northwest Florida? Abby, you remember?
No.
One of the football teams uses this name. Seminoles, Creek, other distinct tribes settled down here. So big things to know. First human beings come to North America somewhere between 15 and 20,000 years ago. Scientists don't all agree on this, but they agree sort of most in that chunk right there. Probably somewhere between 15, 20,000 years ago, humans come from Asia across the Bering Land Sea Ice Bridge and come to North America. These will become Native Americans. These are going to be the peoples that Columbus, etc., will find already living here when they come here. And then what do they start doing?
Creating civilization around them, or on top of them.
Yeah, killing them all and taking all their land. All right, so the first Europeans to get to North America were? Who were the first Europeans to get to North America?
The British?
The Spanish beat the British here. And the first cities established in North America are here in Florida. St. Augustine gets the credit of being the first city that was founded by the Spanish, and Pensacola gets credit of being the second city founded by Europeans here. So the Spanish come first. They settle in southeastern United States, and eventually they settle all the west from Texas to California. But the next big group, and the one that's really going to be important, because this is the group basically where the country comes from, are the British, the English. They come over, they found settlements on the east coast of the United States, and they are going to be the ones that found the 13 original colonies from which the present United States comes from. But they're not it. Who else settled here?
French.
The French settle here, particularly in Canada, along the Mississippi River and places like New Orleans, just right down the road. The Dutch form a settlement. They call it New Amsterdam, and then the British basically take it from them, and they call it
New York.
New York. Even Sweden had a small colony in what we call today's Delaware. But the big things you want to know, the first Europeans get here in the 1500s. That's Spanish, settle first here, Florida. St. Augustine and Pensacola. The British settled down the east coast of the United States, but there's other people here too. French, Dutch, and Swedes being some of the bigger European countries, or bigger groups of Europeans that settle in what we now call the United States. All right, so we see some of that there. The Spanish settle in Florida and Mexico. The Spanish eventually will start settling all the way up through California. So, when you live in California, anybody live in California? Do you find Spanish influence in California? How do you see it?
The names of the
The
places.
names of the place. Los Angeles, San Diego. San Diego means Saint Diego. And the food, what kind of food do you get in California that's Mexican heritage, Latin American?
Mexican food.
I think of burritos, best burritos are in California, if you ask me. On the other side of the country, see here in that pink, that's where the English start settling. And if you remember your history, the 13 original colonies are going to form here and be British colonies. Make sense?
Yep.
Most people came here because they wanted to. They came here why? Why does people come to this forest in the middle of nowhere?
Opportunities.
Opportunities. They wanted economic opportunities, the chance to make money, and not just for them, but for who, really?
Their families.
Their families. That's what parents want. They want their kids to have a better life than they do, opportunities they didn't. We're going to see people come to America for another big reason after economic reasons.
Land.
Land, that's an economic reason, because if you were in England, all the land was already bought. You come to America, and an Englishman would say, oh, that's land's free for the taking, because they didn't recognize the fact that the natives had a claim to that land. So an Englishman would be hard to get land in England, it would be expensive, but they come to America and knock some Indians on their heads, and they could take that land. So land is wealth. Why? Because you could trap on it and farm on it. But why else did people come to America?
Freedom.
Freedom, specifically. Why'd the Pilgrims come here? Religious freedom.
Oh yeah.
So we're going to see people come from around the world, even today, but back in the original settlement in the colonies, come here for economic opportunities and religious freedom. Some people were forced to come here. They had no say in it. Who's that, Abby? The slaves. Almost as soon as America begins, as far back as 1619, the first slaves were brought from Africa into what today is the United States. How did slavery work? African tribes would have wars, or they would raid other African tribes. They would steal any of the people they could grab up, women, children, men, whoever. They would bring the kidnapped people to the coasts, where they basically had these big prison camps. And then people from Europe, English, French, Portuguese, would buy these human beings as property, take them to the United States and other places too, Latin and South America, and sell them as slaves. So these people were kidnapped, taken across the ocean, sold to somebody else, and treated as property. Why? You're going to see there's going to be big farms that people are starting to create in what we call the United States. And to run those farms, they found it was too expensive and hard to attract people to come voluntarily. So they said, hey, look, I could buy these human beings. They are my property now, just like a tractor would be, or a horse would be, or an ox would be. And they use those slaves as their workforce. They don't have to keep the slave alive. They don't have to give them a great life. They don't necessarily have to pay them. And those slaves become the workforce and becomes the engine that drives the economy of many of the early colonies, particularly the southern colonies that are formed on the back of slavery. By 1807, 500,000 people who were living in the colonies were slaves. That was a significant part of the population. 1807, there may have been 4 million people living in the colonies. 500,000 of them were slaves. Early part of the United States history, the colonies' history, the bulk of the immigration does come from Europe, as we see again on that slide. We get a big influx of human beings into the country through slavery, smaller numbers from other places. As we see over time, another graph showing you the data, immigration is a huge part of our country's history. We've always had lots of immigrants. What has changed again is where they come from. So blue is Europe. Early part of our history, the bulk of our immigration was from Europe. More recent history, bulk of the immigration is from Latin America and Asia. Another graph showing that data just in a slightly different way. So, big part of our population today, 13%, newly arrived immigrants. 98, 99% of us, though, came here somewhere along this time frame. Same thing, biggest number of immigrants come from where again, Abs?
Europe or
Today,
Latin America?
Latin America, second place.
Asia.
Asia. Other ways the United States has changed over time. Back during the colonies, if you had a job, what was your job probably?
Working on a farm.
You're probably working on a farm. That changes over time. Today, the bulk of people, do they work on farms?
No.
What do they do?
Like industrial jobs.
They either work industrial jobs or factories, or what's the other big thing? You know what you call, if I'm a doctor, a lawyer, I work at a Walmart, I cook food at a restaurant or a Whataburger.
Like a service?
Service jobs. We see over time, during the beginning of the country, if you're American, you're probably a farmer or did farm-related work. Now, only a tiny percent of Americans farm. I think it's less than 10% of Americans make their living farming. The bulk of us make our living either in industrial jobs, making stuff, or service jobs, doing things for people. I program computers. That's a service job. I'm a dentist. I pull people's teeth out. That's a service job. Okay? So that's going to be something that changes America greatly. People move from rural places, farms in the countryside, to urban places, big cities. So once upon a time, again, American was a farmer living in a farm community. Today, the average American is living in a big city, working in a big city or a suburb of a big city, in a most likely service job. Second to that is an industrial job. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Why did people leave farms and go to cities, Abby?
Was it like becoming inconvenient or like easier things started becoming more popular or like better ways to do it?
People found that they could provide better lives for their families by leaving that hard, low-paying farm job to probably still hard, particularly in the beginning of the industrial era, but to easier lives with better opportunity. And then everything else cities have to offer. You may not like big cities, but let's face it. Is Pensacola the same as Philadelphia, Abby?
No.
What's some of the difference between small city, rural Pensacola and a big city, Philadelphia?
Like entertainment, the amount of people, the cultural melting pot.
Absolutely. People move to these cities not just for economic opportunities to get better high-paying jobs, but also for the other things. There's a lot of people, so what does that bring? A lot of entertainment, a lot of opportunities, everything from different restaurants to different jobs to different culture. You live in a city like Philadelphia, you got professional sports, you got big museums, etc. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So America changes not from immigration coming from other countries, but immigration within the country. An American who was once a farmer living in the countryside now has moved physically and now is a service worker living in a city or an urban environment. Hopefully you learned somewhere along the line of Civil War. I don't teach history, but we're going to hit some of this history stuff here and there. But by the Civil War, 1861, 1865, those African Americans who were held in slavery are now freed. The Civil War was fought because of slavery. Once the United States, the North, the Union won the Civil War, part of the South coming back into the United States was going to be, okay, we're going to change the government and we're going to make slavery illegal. So those 500,000 slaves are now freed. What do? Are they going to stay in the South on farms? No. A lot of those freed slaves moved to the North and the Middle West, again, to find what?
Job opportunities.
Job opportunities, better lives, better lifestyles. Other terminology we see here in this change from factory jobs and farm jobs to service and professional jobs. There's a term called blue collar. If you're a blue collar worker, what are you?
Factory worker.
Probably farmer, factory worker. You work with your hands. If you're a white collar worker, you are a
service job.
Service job professional office worker. So a teacher is a
service.
And I am a
white collar.
Yeah. Other big changes. In the beginning of the country's history, were women out working?
No.
What were they doing?
Like making clothes and cooking and taking care of the kids.
They were taking care of families and they did work within the home. So they may be, yes, making clothes. And that clothes might not just be for their own family. They may be making stuff for other families, but they're working in the home doing domestic tasks. They're raising kids. In the beginning of their life, they were teaching those kids too, because schools don't come around for a little while. They do work around the house while the men are doing the other jobs outside of the house. Is that the same today?
No.
Absolutely not. And if we were here, we'd say, okay, how many moms work out there? And I'll find more than half the class, moms are outside of the house working, okay? So another big change in America's culture and society is women aren't at home raising kids and cooking and doing domestic chores. More than half the women are out in the workforce in traditional jobs making money like male counterparts. Service jobs are on the increase, manufacturing jobs are on the decrease. Another big thing is a lot of people work from home. I'd again have you all raise your hands and say, hey, who has parents working from home? You see that more and more. How can you have more people working from home, Abby? What was the big technologies that make working from home possible?
Computer.
Computing and telephone, etc. Yes. So a lot of those jobs, it doesn't matter where you are. You can do it just as easily from your couch as you could in an office building or somewhere else. Proving this right now if you're watching this online. You're not in a classroom. You're sitting on your couch eating cheese doodles and watching me. Okay? Any questions on that?
No.
13% of us are immigrants. 99% of us are children of immigrants. Okay? We come from all over the place. Just in my own family, we have Polish and German background. Abby, since she's got her mom's background in there, she's got Polish background, German background, Scots, Irish background, okay? So take a look at these and see what ethnicities are in different parts of the country and see how that affects our culture and heritage today. And just some simple stuff. Abby, where do most Latin American Mexican immigrants live in the United States? You have any idea?
Texas.
Texas, where else?
California.
California, where else?
Other
Florida
places
also,
left.
right? Yeah. So we're going to see these ethnic groups, they're diverse, which means they're throughout the country, but you'll see parts of the country have a bigger impact. Asians also tend to settle on the West Coast and even some places in the South. So you see the country develop with the culture, traditions, and things that these different ethnic groups bring to the United States. Take a look on this on your own, examine that data. So again, if we boil it down, the majority of this country, even with all that immigration, what is the majority of the United States if you look at their ethnic heritage?
Well, non-Latino white.
Right. So 63, 64% of the country, the majority, and a significant majority, is non-Latino Caucasian, basic European background, probably white. What's the next biggest groups?
Latino.
Latinos, and right close to them are?
Non-Latino,
Yep, African Americans. So you got probably 63% of the country is Caucasian, 13+% Latin American, just around 13 African American. This is 2010. By 2040, this will be less than 50%. So you see how the country is changing also, okay? Non-Latino, white Caucasian, majority of the country, 63-ish% of the country is Caucasian. By 2040, what you're going to see is that pie is going to shrink to less than 50%. Why? All these are getting bigger, but particularly the Latin, Latino, and African American. We'll see that expand through 2040 with the white number, Caucasian number contracting. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Another place we're diverse is religion. America is a very religious country. The majority of Americans profess some sort of religious faith. What is the biggest general religious faith in the United States?
Christianity.
Christianity. I've been teaching this is my 4th year. When I ask what Christianity is, it surprises me how many people really can't explain it. So I'll go out of my way to say this. Christianity is this bunch of religions. It's not just one religion. It's a whole bunch of religions where the biggest thing they believe in their faith is what?
God.
Not just God, but God's Son, Jesus, is the big focus of that faith. And what's the big book for Christians?
Bible.
We'll call it the Bible. So Christianity is a bunch of faiths where the big parts of their religion are Jesus, God's Son, and the rule book is the Bible. Now, there's a lot of different faiths in Christianity, and they're different. Like Roman Catholics are different than Baptists, but they all share that general belief of in Jesus, in the Bible, and those people are Christians. And after that, what are the big faiths after that? You have people who worship Islam, but the really big one and growing, it's not a faith, but you can think of it as a faith. What's the gray there, Abby?
Atheism.
Yes. This says no religion, so you're an atheist, which means
No religion.
no religion, you don't believe in God at all. Basically, an atheist will say there is no God. Close to an atheist is something called an agnostic. Do you know what an agnostic is?
Aren't they just like they're like there's a supernatural something, but they don't know what it is?
An atheist will say there is no God. An agnostic says, there's probably no God. So it's a slight difference, but it's a difference.
Yeah.
An agnostic will probably hold out the possibility that there is some sort of God, some sort of supreme being. An atheist will say, no way, no how, there isn't one. So another way the United States is different in traditions and cultures is since we're coming from all over the world, we have all these different religions. Christianity is the biggest religion. Why? Because where did most of America come from in our early history?
Europe.
Europe. And what religions do they have in Europe?
Christianity.
Christianity. And then even now, the big religions in Latin America are Christianity. Okay? So, people are people, and of course you have a choice in your religion, but chances are, if your parents are Christian, what's your religion going to be?
Christian.
Yeah. Can you, become an adult and change that along the line? Sure, absolutely, and people do it. But most things we adopt our tradition and our beliefs from our parents, and sometimes we don't even think about them that much. So if my parents are Christian, more than likely I'm going to be.
Yeah.
So America's still majority Christian, but we have these other faiths, particularly Jewish and Muslim faiths in there. And the biggest other non-faith faith is you have no religion. All right? Big things we're going to talk about a lot this year. But our big cultural and political traditions revolve around this idea of freedom. We already said that people came here for economic freedom, ability to make some money and a better life for my kids, and religious freedom. I can pray the way I want to without government interference. The government cannot tell me how to pray or what religion to follow. So people come here for freedom. That's a huge part of our cultural tradition. The government is supposed to stay out of our lives as much as possible. So again, part of our cultural tradition that's going to feed into the government, our government is, government should not be in my life. Government should not be affecting my ability to pray. Government should not be affecting my free speech. Government should not be able to just arrest me for no reason. Government should not just be able to throw me in a prison cell without what?
Free trial.
Trial, lawyer rights, etc. So we're going to talk about a lot this all year. But where we come from, these ideas of freedoms are going to be very important. Also, the idea of popular sovereignty. Seems complicated. Popular means of the people, and sovereignty means who has power. We have this idea of popular sovereignty in our country. People have the power. How do we show that people have the power in our political system? Abigail?
Voting.
Voting. I get to vote for my government. Is that a perfect system?
No.
Do I always get what I want?
No.
But the idea, the basis of our culture and our government is people have the power. We exert that power through the vote. And that's what we say there, okay? Government is limited in power. Most Americans believe government should have some limits, and we talk about that a lot this year. Like, I should be able to say what I want without the government throwing me in jail. Does my neighbor have to listen to what I say?
No.
Can I mouth off to my teacher and mom and not expect to have some sort of issue from it?
No.
But we do have free speech guaranteed in our Constitution, First Amendment of the Bill of Rights, which basically says I can say things without the fear of the government kicking in my door and dragging me away for the things I say. Okay? So limited in government is going to be important, because if government power isn't limited, people can never be sovereign. And we're going to be talking about it all through the year. The place that writes down all our rules for government is called the Constitution, and the big place we go to that's part of the Constitution that tells us what our rights are is called the Bill of Rights. Not very exciting, not very novel way to call it, but the Bill of Rights, first 10 amendments of the Constitution, break down what our basic rights are as an American citizen. All right, see you around. Hope you enjoyed it. We're going to start part 2 here shortly.